आशिक की नजर, जब तक ना पड़े आशिक की नजर। सिंगार अधूरा रहता है घूंघट की आड़ से दिलबर का।
घूंघट की आड़ से दिलबर का दीदार अधूरा रहता है। जब तक ना मिले नजरों से नजर, जब तक ना मिले नजरों से नजर, इकरार अधूरा रहता है घूंघट की आड़ से दिलबर का।
दिलबर का दिलबर का दिलबर का,
दिलबर का दिलबर का दिलबर का। मुखड़े से घुंघटा हटाने दे,
घड़ी अपने मिलन की तो आने दे।
मेरे दिल पे नहीं मेरा काबू है,
कुछ नहीं ये तो चाहत का जादू है।
बढ़ती ही जाती है सनम प्यार की ये बेखुदी हो।
दो प्रेमियों के ना मिलने से संसार अधूरा रहता है। जब तक ना पड़े आशिक की नजर, जब तक ना पड़े आशिक की नजर। सिंगार अधूरा रहता है घूंघट की आड़ से दिलबर का।
दिलबर का दिलबर का दिलबर का,
हाँ, दिलबर का दिलबर का दिलबर का।
हाँ मोहब्बत में मिलना जरूरी है,
पास आने का अच्छा बहाना है।
क्या करूं मैं कि मौसम दीवाना है।
दिल मेरा धड़काने लगी अब तो ये दीवानगी हो।
बिना किसी यार के जाने जा ये प्यार अधूरा रहता है। जब तक ना मिले नजरों से नजर, जब तक ना मिले नजरों से नजर, इकरार अधूरा रहता है घूंघट की आड़ से दिलबर का।
घूंघट की आड़ से दिलबर का दीदार अधूरा रहता है। जब तक ना पड़े आशिक की नजर। सिंगार अधूरा रहता है घूंघट की आड़ से दिलबर का।
दिलबर का दिलबर का दिलबर का,
दिलबर का दिलबर का दिलबर का।
हाँ दिलबर का दिलबर का दिलबर का।
हाँ, दिलबर का दिलबर का दिलबर का।
दिलबर का दिलबर का दिलबर का।
दिलबर का दिलबर
किसी रोज तुमसे मुलाकात होगी, किसी रोज तुमसे मुलाकात होगी। मेरी जान उस दिन मेरे साथ होगी, मगर कब न जाने ये बरसात होगी। मेरा दिल है प्यासा, मेरा दिल अकेला, जरा तस्वीर से तू निकल के सामने आ मेरी महबूबा। मेरी तकदीर है तू मचल के सामने आ मेरी महबूबा, मेरी महबूबा, मेरी महबूबा, मेरी महबूबा, मेरी महबूबा, मेरी महबूबा। जरा तस्वीर से तू निकल के सामने आ मेरी महबूबा। Obla di di di, obla da da da, obla do do do, what to do?
Obla di dang di, obla da da da, obla do we love you.
नहीं याद कब से मगर मैं हूँ जब से, मेरे दिल में तेरी मोहब्बत है तब से। मैं शायर हूँ तेरा, तू मेरी गजल है, बड़ी बेकरारी मुझे आजकल है, बड़ी बेकरारी मुझे आजकल है, मुझे आजकल है। जरा तस्वीर से तू निकल के सामने आ मेरी महबूबा, मेरी महबूबा, मेरी महबूबा, मेरी महबूबा, मेरी महबूबा, मेरी महबूबा। जरा तस्वीर से तू निकल के सामने आ मेरी महबूबा।
Corre, mustaquero, como te pasa, remucarredo, las Rebeca tengo, ya ne kahan se lo a gayi hai wo.
Obla di di di, obla da da da, obla do we love you.
किसी रोज अपनी मुलाकात होगी, मेरी जान उस दिन मेरे साथ होगी। मगर कब न जाने ये बरसात होगी। मेरा दिल है प्यासा, मेरा दिल अकेला। जरा तस्वीर से तू निकल के सामने आ, मेरी महबूबा, मेरी महबूबा, मेरी महबूबा, मेरी महबूबा, मेरी महबूबा, मेरी महबूबा। चुपके चुपके दो दिल मिल रहे हैं, मगर चुपके चुपके सबको हो रही है। हाँ, सबको हो रही है खबर। चुपके चुपके ओ दो दिल मिल रहे हैं, मगर चुपके चुपके। सांसों में बड़ी बेकरारी, आंखों में कई रत जगे। कभी कहीं लग जाए दिल तो कहीं फिर दिल ना लगे। अपना दिल मैं जरा थम लूं, जादू का मैं इसे नाम दूं। जादू कर रहा है, जादू कर रहा है असर। चुपके चुपके दो दिल मिल रहे हैं, मगर चुपके चुपके। ऐसे भोले बनकर है बैठे, जैसे कोई बात नहीं। सब कुछ नजर आ रहा है, दिन है ये रात नहीं। क्या है कुछ भी नहीं है अगर होठों पे है खामोशी, मगर बातें कर रही है, बातें कर रही है नजर। चुपके चुपके दो दिल मिल रहे हैं, मगर चुपके चुपके।
आग लगने से पहले उठता है ऐसा धुआं, जैसा है इधर का नजारा ओ, वैसा ही उधर का समा। दिल में कैसी कसक सी जगी, दोनों जानिब बराबर लगी। देखो तो इधर से, देखो तो इधर से, उधर चुपके चुपके दो दिल मिल रहे हैं, मगर चुपके चुपके सबको हो रही है, हाँ सबको हो रही है खबर। चुपके चुपके हो दो दिल मिल रहे हैं, मगर चुपके चुपके। मगर चुपके चुपके, मगर चुपके चुपके, चुपके चुपके, हाँ हाँ चुपके चुपके।
हो हो ओ मेरे ढोलना, ओ मेरे साजना, मैं तेरा हो गया, इश्क विच खो गया।
कसम लूं मैं रब की, कसम ले तू रब की, कभी एक तुझे का न दामन छोड़ना, ओ मेरे ढोलना।
रानी हो ऐसी प्रेम कहानी हो।
होठों पे मुस्काने हो, आँखों में ना पानी हो।
तू दिल में रहती है, ये धड़कन कहती है, कहा जो भी तूने वो फिर से बोलना।
ओ मेरे ढोलना, ओ मेरे साजना, मैं तेरी हो गई, इश्क विच खो गई।
ओ मेरे ढोलना, ओ मेरे साजना, मैं तेरा हो गया, इश्क विच खो गया।
कसम लूं मैं रब की, कसम ले तू रब की, कभी एक दूजे का न दामन छोड़ना।
ओ मेरे ढोलना,
ओ मेरे साजना,
रिश्ता बड़ा ही प्यारा है, दिल का रिश्ता बड़ा ही प्यारा है। कितना पागल ये दिल हमारा है।
हम तो एक दूसरे पे मरते हैं, हम तो एक दूसरे पे मरते हैं। जानता ये जहान सारा है, दिल का रिश्ता बड़ा ही प्यारा है। अपने होस्न ये संवारा है, अपने होस्न ये संवारा है। कितना पागल ये दिल हमारा है, दिल का रिश्ता बड़ा ही प्यारा है।
तन्हा तन्हाइयों में जाने मन, तन्हा तन्हाइयों में जाने मन, तन्हा तन्हाइयों में जाने मन। मैंने
अक्सर तुम्हें पुकारा है, मैंने अक्सर तुम्हें पुकारा है। कितना पागल ये दिल हमारा है, दिल का रिश्ता बड़ा ही प्यारा है।
देखता हूँ जहाँ तुम ही तुम हो, देखता हूँ जहाँ तुम ही तुम हो, देखता हूँ जहाँ तुम ही तुम हो। और नज़ारों में क्या नज़ारा है, और नज़ारों में क्या नजारा है। कितना पागल ये दिल हमारा है,
दिल का रिश्ता बड़ा ही प्यारा है, दिल का रिश्ता बड़ा ही प्यारा है।
नजर नजर ढूंढे उसे मेरी नजर, आएगी एक दिन वो मेरे सामने। उसकी अदा ने मुझको आशिक बना के छोड़ा, आके मेरी नींदों में ख्वाबों से रिश्ता जोड़ा। न उसको पता है न उसको खबर है, मैं उस पे फिदा इस कदर। नजर नजर ढूंढे उसे मेरी नजर, आएगी एक दिन वो मेरे सामने। कभी ना ऐसा हुआ था जो अब हुआ, जाना जाने तमन्ना मैंने न जाना क्या कब हुआ। मेरे दिल पे दिल पर जो छाया जुनून है, तेरे इश्क का है असर। नजर नजर ढूंढे उसे मेरी नजर, आएगी एक दिन वो मेरे सामने।
La 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 la
करेगी एक दिन ये मेरी आवारगी।
देखी ना ऐसी मोहब्बत, दिखाना ऐसा दीवाना, तेरी जवां धड़कनों में अब तो है मेरा ठिकाना।
कभी ना कभी तो कहीं ना कहीं तो मिलेगी वो जान जिगर। नजर नजर
नजर नजर
ढूंढे उसे,
ढूंढे मुझे
मेरी नजर
तेरी नजर।
आएगी एक दिन वो मेरे सामने। उसकी अदा ने मुझको आशिक बना के छोड़ा, आगे मेरी नींदों में ख्वाबों से रिश्ता जोड़ा। ना उसको पता है ना उसको खबर है, मैं उस पे फिदा इस कदर। नजर नजर ढूंढे उसे, मेरी नजर आएगी एक दिन वो मेरे सामने।
ये मोहब्बत भी एक इबादत है, और ये इबादत भी एक मोहब्बत है। ये भी दीवानगी है, वो भी दीवानगी है, ये भी दिल की लगी है, वो भी दिल की लगी है। मुझको क्या हो गया है, सबको हैरानगी है।
हो गया है मुझे प्यार, हो गया है मुझे
जमाना दिलों को नहीं जानता है, जमाने को ये दिल नहीं मानता है। नहीं और कोई फकत इश्क है वो जो आशिक की नजरों को पहचानता है, जो आशिक की नजरों को पहचानता है।
अब वक्त फैसले का नजदीक आ गया है, क्या फैसला करूं मैं? दिल ने तो ये कहा है, दिल ने तो ये कहा है, दिल ने तो ये कहा है, जीने का है शौक तो मरने को हो जा तैयार। हो गया है मुझे प्यार, हो गया है मुझे प्यार। नहीं होना था लेकिन हो गया है मुझे प्यार, हो गया है मुझे प्यार।
वापस कर आई बाबुल को मैं शादी का जोड़ा, मैंने प्यार को पहन लिया रे, प्यार को सर पे ओढ़ा। फेंक दी मैंने गली में छूटी रस्मों की अंगूठी, तोड़ दिए सब लाज के पहरे, मैं हर कैद से छूटी। पग पग ठोकर खाऊं चलती जाऊं आँखें मीठी, आगे मेरे साजन का कर दुनिया रह गई पीछे।
एक दुआ मांगू मैं, बिछड़ा यार मुझे मिल जाए, मेरे पीरो मुर्शिद मेरा प्यार मुझे मिल जाए। अपना लाल दुपट्टा मैंने दिल के खून से रंगा, अपना लाल दुपट्टा मैंने दिल के खून से रंगा। ये संगम हो जाए सागर से मिल जाए गंगा, सागर से मिल जाए गंगा, सागर से मिल जाए गंगा, सागर से मिल जाए गंगा। नहीं होना था, 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 लेकिन हो गया है मुझे प्यार, हो गया है मुझे प्यार।
हमसे मिला करो। कोई शिकवा अगर हो और शिकायत अगर हो, हमसे गिला करो, पर तुम मिला करो। जा मैंने भी प्यार किया है, हाँ मैंने भी प्यार किया है।
हम प्यार हैं तुम्हारे, दिलदार हैं तुम्हारे, हमसे मिला करो, हमसे मिला करो।
There's a friend for little children above the bright blue skies, a friend who never changes, whose love shall never die. Unlike our friends by nature, who change with changing years, this friend is always with us. His name is God alone.
कैसे मैं भुला दूँ वो बीते हुए पल, हर लम्हा सताए वो गुजरा हुआ कल।
कैसे मैं बताऊं ये मुश्किल राज है, कल आए ना कभी, जो है वो आज है। मेरी जान पास आके बोल दो मुस्कुरा के, चुप न रहा करो, चुप न रहा करो। कोई शिकवा अगर हो और शिकायत अगर हो, हमसे गिला करो, पर तुम मिला करो। फूलों की वादियाँ, बर्फीले रास्ते, है जाने तमन्ना सब तेरे वास्ते।
फूलों में है चुभन, सर्दी में अगन है, सांसों में रात दिन, ये कैसी जलन है।
हे 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 हे, हाँ हाँ हाँ, हे हे हे। सर्द ठंडी हवाएं कह रही हैं फिजाएं, यूं न जला करो, यूं न जला करो। कोई शिकवा अगर हो और शिकायत अगर हो, हमसे गिला करो, पर तुम मिला करो। हम प्यार हैं तुम्हारे, दिलदार हैं तुम्हारे, हमसे मिला करो, हमसे मिला करो। कोई शिकवा अगर हो और शिकायत अगर हो, हमसे गिला करो, पर तुम मिला मिला करो। हाँ मैंने भी प्यार किया है।
सब निशानी है और क्या जिंदगानी है, और क्या जिंदगानी है। से मांगी वही तुम दुआ हो।
कौन हमें दुनिया में इतना प्यार देगा,
इतनी खुशी और ऐसा संसार देगा।
मुझे रहना है इन्हीं चरणों में, उम्र बाहों में यूं बितानी है, और क्या जिंदगानी है, और क्या जिंदगानी है।
ऐसी अपनी दोस्ती है ऐसा दोस्ताना,
याद करेगा हमको सारा जमाना। दोस्ती पे बिल्कुल न करना भरोसा, दोस्त बन के देते हैं लोग यहाँ धोखा।
दोस्ती हम ना कभी तोड़ेंगे, आज हमने ये दिल में ठानी है, और क्या जिंदगानी
रात तड़पता हूँ, मिलने को तरसता हूँ। दिन रात तड़पता हूँ, मिलने को तरसता हूँ।
बोले मेरा कंगना तेरे बिन सजना नींद नहीं आती। बोले मेरा कंगना तेरे बिन सजना नींद नहीं आती। होके जुदा मुझसे तुझे क्या चैन आता है।
दिन रात तड़पता हूँ, मिलने को तरसता हूँ। दिन रात तड़पता हूँ, मिलने को तरसता हूँ।
तुझसे मिली मैं दीवानी बनी।
तू मेरे सपनों की रानी बनी।
तुझसे मिली मैं दीवानी बनी।
तू मेरे सपनों की रानी बनी।
आए सनम प्यार करने के दिन।
हाँ, पलकों तले जीने मरने के दिन।
छाने लगा प्रीत का अब नशा।
दुनिया की रस्में, दुनिया की कसमें तोड़ के आ जाना।
So today we are starting a new chapter, that is menopause. Menopause is simply defined as the cessation of menstrual cycle, and a woman who had experienced 12 months of amenorrhea without any pathological or physiological cause is known as menopause. Perimenopause refers to the time period around the menopause, and it is the time of life from the onset of ovarian dysfunction until 1 year since the last menstrual period. And postmenopause refers to the 1 year since the last menstrual period. And the menopause usually occur at a median age of 51 to 52 years. Now let's talk about the risk factors that can lead to a menopause. First one is the iatrogenic causes. The iatrogenic causes include bilateral oophorectomy, which is the removal of both the ovaries, and the constant high doses of GnRH. So the continuous dosing of GnRH, they desensitize the FSH and LH receptors and the anterior pituitary, and hence they decrease the release of FSH and LH and will lead to the amenorrhea. And the constant high doses of GnRH are used in various gynecological conditions like endometriosis, but they may also causes menopause. Second one is the premature ovarian failure. Premature ovarian failure is the menopause before the age of 40 years, and it is usually associated with elevated level of FSH and LH because there is decrease in the level of estrogen, which causes compensatory increase in the FSH and LH. And premature ovarian failure, the biological appearance of the ovary are those of the postmenopausal ovary. And the causes of premature ovarian failure include primary causes and secondary causes. The primary causes include chromosomal anomalies like Turner syndrome, enzyme deficiencies like galactosemia, 17 alpha hydroxylase deficiency, which are congenital adrenal hyperplasia, certain autoimmune diseases like hypothyroidism, Addison disease, and myasthenia gravis. All of these can cause premature ovarian failure. The secondary causes of premature ovarian failure include chemotherapy, exposure to radiation, and infection with the Mycobacterium, varicella, mumps, and the malaria. Third one is the resistant ovary syndrome. It may also causes menopause. And resistant ovary syndrome, they are viable and abundant follicles in the ovaries, but they are resistant to the FSH and LH. Therefore, it is usually associated with normal level of FSH and LH, but there is decrease in the estrogen level. And resistant ovary syndrome, the biological appearance of the ovary are normal with abundant primordial follicle. Next is the hormonal changes in menopause. So the diagnosis of menopause is usually clinical. The first endocrine change is the fall in inhibin level, which prevent the release of FSH. So when the inhibin level decreases, there will be compensatory increase in the FSH level above the premenopausal state, and the rise in LH level also occur, but it occur later after FSH level increases. And before menopause, The estrogen source is ovaries that are released from the granulosa cell after ovary, and the progesterone is released from corpus luteum, and the level of GnRH hormone they fluctuate with the menstrual cycle. After menopause, the estrogen is formed by the peripheral conversion of adrenal androstenedione onto estrone, whereas the progesterone is formed from the peripheral aromatization of the adrenal steroids. And after menopause, the level of GnRH hormone are persistently elevated. So in menopause, there is initially fall in the inhibin level, and there will be a compensatory increase in the FSH level, and after FSH, there will be also a rise in the LH level occur, and the level of GnRH hormone will also be elevated. So in the perimenopause and postmenopause, initially the GnRH level increase in pulsatility in perimenopausal period, but it then progressively decline in the postmenopausal period. Similarly, the FSH and LH level are increased in the perimenopause state, and postmenopausal women initially FSH and LH level are raised, but then there decreases progressively, and the estrogen, progesterone, inhibin, and the testosterone level all decreases in the post menopausal women. Next is the symptoms in a postmenopausal woman. So in menopause, there will be immediate symptoms occur, intermediate symptoms occur, and delayed symptoms. And the immediate symptoms, initially we have vasomotor symptoms, which are most common. And the vasomotor symptoms include hot flushes, which are a classical vasomotor symptom. And hot flushes, when occur at night time, they are called as night sweats, and they occur in about 80% of the women. And the hot flushes occur because of disturbance of thermoregulatory center, that is the hypothalamus, and it occur is a consequence of vascular response to the change in the thermoregulatory center. And the heart flushes which occur at night time, it causes the awakening of the female from sleep, and hence will affect the quality and the quantity of the sleep. And the factors that are associated with the increasing worsening of the symptoms, that is the heart flushes, are female who consume alcohol, who do smoking, caffeine consumption, and a high BMI level. Next one is the psychological symptoms. So psychological symptoms are also the immediate symptoms, and they occur in a menopausal lady, and they include the mood swings, irritability, depressed mood, anxiety, lethargy, fatigue, changes in the memory and cognitive function. Second one is the intermediate symptoms that occur from 3 to 10 years, and intermediate symptoms include sexual dysfunction. So sexual problem are common in the menopause, and that include loss of sexual desire, loss of sexual arousal, problem with the orgasm, and there is sexual pain, which is known as dyspareunia. And there is also urogenital atrophy occur in the menopausal lady, and urogenital atrophy occur because of estrogen deficiency, and urogenital atrophy, the staining of the uvula occur, vaginal dryness occur, etching occur, urinary symptoms like urinary frequency, urgency, and nocturia occur, and there is increasing risk of the infection. Third one is the delay symptoms that occur after more than 10 years of menopause. First one is the cardiovascular diseases. So in menopausal lady, there is increasing risk of MI and the stroke. And the risk of MI and stroke increases because of the decrease in the estrogen level, because the estrogen is associated with the maintenance of the lipid profile. So an estrogen deficiency, there will be disturbance in the lipid profile occur, like there will be elevation of total cholesterol occur, there will be decrease in the high density lipoprotein, which are the good cholesterol, and there will be increase in the LDL, which is known as the bad cholesterol, whereas the triglyceride level remain normal. So due to the deficiency of estrogen, the LDL level will rise, and the HDL level will decrease, which increases the risk of stroke and MI due to atherogenesis or atherosclerosis. And there will be also symptoms of the skeletal system, because in estrogen deficiency, there will be increase in the bone turn means that there will be increase in the bone resorption and decrease in the bone formation, and hence it will lead to the increasing risk of the fracture of trabecular bone. And the common sites involved in the fracture are hip joints and the vertebra. And usually a skeleton is composed of two types of bone, the compact bone and the trabecular bone. The compact bone make up about 80% of the skeleton, and it is insensitive to the estrogen, whereas the trabecular bone that made up constitute 20% of the skeletal bone, and it is highly sensitive to the estrogen and more prone to the resorption after menopause. So in menopause, there is increasing risk of fracture that are made of the trabecular bone. Next is the management of the menopause. So initially, we advise the patient conservative treatment that include the lifestyle modification and dietary changes like cessation of the smoking, reduction of the alcohol consumption, take care of the diet, do regular exercise, and maintain a normal BMI. The second one is non-hormonal approaches. The non-hormonal approaches include complementary therapy like acupuncture, which is a traditional Chinese method where the needle are inserted into specific points on the body. We also advise hypnotics, and we also advise certain herbal therapies, and the non-hormonal therapies for the control of vasomotor symptoms include alpha adrenergic agonists, that is clonidine, beta blockers like propranolol, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors like fluoxetine and paroxetine, and the GABA analogs like gabapentin. They are all associated with controlling the vasomotor symptoms. Third one is the hormone replacement therapy. So HRT is the mainstay of treatment of the menopausal symptoms, and the HRT involve the use of one or more group of medication that are designed to artificially boost the estrogen and progesterone level and relieve the menopausal symptoms. And the HRT can be given either systemically for the control of vasomotor symptoms and osteoporosis. It can be also given locally for the control of local symptoms, that is the vaginal dryness. And the HRT may either contain estrogen only. So the HRT containing estrogen is advised in the woman who had undergone hysterectomy before, because there is no risk of the endometrial stimulation and subsequent hyperplasia. So a woman who had undergone hysterectomy before, we give HRT that contain estrogen only. Second one is the HRT containing the estrogen and progesterone. They are advised in the postmenopausal women, and they include both estrogen and progesterone. And the progesterone is used to prevent the endometrium from the continuous stimulation of the estrogen stimulation and prevent the endometrial hyperplasia. And premenopausal women, we give estrogen and the cyclical progestrogen and the HRT. Whereas in postmenopausal women that are more than 54 years of age, we give continuous estrogen and progestrogen. So now let's talk about the properties of the estrogen and progestogen. So the estrogen used in the HRT is estradiol, which is the main physiological form of the estrogen, and the HRT may also include estrogen in the form of estrone and estriol. And the progestogen, they are structurally different from the progesterone. And the progestogen that are used in the HRT include medroxyprogesterone, levonorgestrel, norethindrone, and micronized progesterone. And the regime used in the HRT, they either include the continuous HRT that include estrogen and progesterone that are given continuously, and the cyclical HRT, which is given over 28-day cycle with a 16 to 18 days of estrogen alone, and then followed by 10 to 12 days of estrogen along with the progesterone. So the HRT is either given as a continuous HRT or the cyclical HRT. Now let's talk about the route of administration of the HRT. So the HRT hormone, that is hormone replacement therapy, they can be given orally, which is the most common route, and they maintain the estradiol, which is physiological estrogen to estrone ratio of 1:2, which is the reverse of the normal physiological ratio. And the oral estrogen are taken once daily, and they are cheap and they are usually well tolerated. And oral route usually involve the past effect, the past metabolism in the liver, and therefore it will interfere with the metabolism of other drug, and similarly it also affect the lipid metabolism and the coagulation system. Second one is the transdermal route. The transdermal route contain the estradiol to estrone ratio of 2:1, and this ratio is highly physiological. That is similar to the premenopausal state, and this route also avoid the pass impact of pass metabolism of the liver. And this route is a particular use in the older patient where continuous or gradual buildup of estrogen is required to avoid the adverse side effects, and they are usually given in case of the osteoporosis. And the third one is the vaginal route. So it is a local route, and it is used for the treatment of the local symptom. And this route is suitable for the women whose symptoms are of the genital origin, and those ladies the systemic route is contraindicated. For example, in a patient who have a past history of breast cancer, we cannot give the HRT to a systemic route. Therefore, we give it locally for the control of the local symptom. Next one is the side effects of the HRT. As the HRT include both estrogen and progesterone, so the estrogenic side effects include breast tenderness, nausea, dyspepsia, headache, and leg cramps. And similarly, the estrogen also increases the risk of thromboembolism. And estrogen increases both the risk of venous thromboembolism and the arterial thromboembolism. And the progesteronic side effects include fluid retention, breast tenderness, that is mastalgia, headache, mood swing, bloating, and acne. Next is the indication of HRT. So HRT advice to the menopausal lady if she had a vasomotor symptoms, which is the first indication and the principal indication of the HRT. And significant improvement is seen in 90% of the cases within 6 weeks of using HRT. Similarly, it is also advised in case of the skeletal symptoms like women who had decrease in the bone mass density. In such a patient, HRT is advised to prevent the osteoporosis and decreases the risk of fracture. And HRT is strongly indicated in women who had premature ovarian failure. And HRT is also indicated in a female who have genitourinary symptoms because HRT decreases the vaginal dryness, irritation, and dyspareunia. Similarly, it also improves the symptoms of cystitis and dysuria. And there is no role of HRT in treatment of incontinence. HRT is also advised in case of the cardiovascular system symptoms because HRT has a protective effect on the cardiovascular symptoms if started early during the menopause because the HRT there decreases the risk of the stroke, and similarly HRT also reduces the risk of ischemic heart diseases. And next is the colonic cancer. So HRT use is associated with a reduction in the mortality of the colonic cancer. However, HRT is not indicated for the protection of the malignancy. Next one is the contraindication of the HRT. First one is the absolute contraindications that include the presence of suspected chances of pregnancy, patient having breast cancer, endometrial cancer, or having active liver disease, patient having uncontrolled hypertension who had a confirmed current history of venous thromboembolism, or patient having coagulation disorder like thrombophilia. And the relative contraindications include presence of a large uterine fibroids, past history of benign breast disease, unconfirmed venous thromboembolism, a patient having the chronic and stable liver disease, a patient having migraine with AVA. And such patient HRT is contraindicated. And the side effects of HRT include return of menstruation in the postmenopausal woman. There may be premenstrual syndrome symptoms occur, increasing risk of thromboembolism. There is increasing risk of endometrial breast and ovarian cancer, and there is also disturbance in the lipid metabolism occur. At the end, let's talk briefly about the postmenopausal bleed, which is the bleeding after 1 year of menopause, and it is also defined as the bleeding from the genital tract after 12 months of amenorrhea in a postmenopausal woman. And the causes of postmenopausal bleeding include endometrial hyperplasia, atopic endometrium, which is the most common cause of postmenopausal bleeding, and the infections like cervicitis, vaginitis may causes bleeding. Similarly, a carcinoma like endometrial carcinoma, cervical cancer, and ovarian cancer, they also cause postmenopausal bleeding. The fibroids, polyps, bleeding disorder, Garten pessaries, and IUCD, they may causes postmenopausal bleed. And similarly, postmenopausal bleed also occur in case of trauma like the attack and intercourse. Next is the management of the postmenopausal bleed. So initially we will take a detailed history in which we ask about age, number of episodes of bleed, the amount of bleeding, the duration of the bleed, and family history of carcinoma. There is any history of bleeding disorder in the family. And examination, initially we do general physical examination, then abdomen and pelvic examination, and similarly we also do past speculum examination. And investigation, we do CBC, coagulation profile. We also do the pelvic ultrasound and the abdominal ultrasound, and similarly we also take endometrial biopsy. And the treatment postmenopausal bleed depends upon the cause. If there is infection, we give the patient antibiotic. In case of carcinoma, we do total abdominal hysterectomy and bilateral salpingo-operectomy. And in case of pessaries, IUCD, we remove the pessary IUCD. So it was all about the menopause and postmenopausal bleeding. So today we are going to start a new chapter, that is the pelvic organ prolapse. So pelvic organ prolapse is the herniation of pelvic organs to and beyond the vaginal wall from their normal anatomical position. And the pelvic organ prolapse is caused by failure of interaction between the levator ani muscles and the ligaments and fascias that support the pelvic organ. So the pelvic support is provided by the muscles, ligaments, and the fascia. And levator ani muscle include iliococcygeus, pubococcygeus, and the puborectalis muscle. Next one is the level of pelvic support. The first one is level 1 support. Level 1 support is provided by the ligaments, that is uterosacral ligament, and this ligament attaches the uterus or the cervix to the sacrum, and its deficiency result in the vaginal wall prolapse. Level 2 support is provided by fascia. Anteriorly there is pubocervical fascia, which is present in between the bladder and the vagina, and its deficiency anteriorly result in anterior vaginal wall prolapse. Posteriorly, the support is provided by the rectovaginal fascia, which is present between the rectum and vagina, and its deficiency posteriorly result in posterior vaginal wall prolapse. Level 3 support is also provided by the fascia, but it is present between the distal posterior vagina and the perineal body, and its deficiency result in the lower posterior vaginal wall prolapse. Now let's talk about the anterior compartment prolapse. So anterior compartment prolapse include the herniation of anterior vaginal wall, which can be cystocele, urethrocoele, and the cystourethrocoele. Cystocele involve the prolapse of the bladder. Urethrocoele involve the prolapse of the urethral descent. In the cystourethrocoele involve the prolapse of both the bladder and the urethra. Next is the posterior compartment prolapse. So posterior compartment prolapse is defined as herniation of the posterior vaginal wall, which can be enterocele or the rectocele. So enterocele involve the small bowel descent with the upper one third of posterior vaginal wall, and rectocele is the rectal descent with the lower two third of the posterior vaginal wall. Next is the apical compartment prolapse. So the apical compartment prolapse include the uterus and the cervix. So there may be a prolapse of the uterus with inversion of vaginal apex occur, or there may be prolapse of the cervix with inversion of the vagina occur. Next is the vaginal apex prolapse, that involve prolapse of the upper vagina to the vagina, and the last one is vaginal wall prolapse, which occur after the hysterectomy. So the apical compartment prolapse include prolapse of the uterus, prolapse of the cervix, prolapse of the vaginal apex, and the vaginal vault. Now let's talk about the etiology of the pelvic organ prolapse. So the first one is the multiple vaginal delivery. So the multiple vaginal delivery, they increases the risk of the pelvic organ prolapse. Second one is menopause. So after menopause, the risk of the pelvic organ prolapse increases. It occurs because of the deficiency of the estrogen, which causes the loosening of the connective tissue, and hence increases the chances of pelvic organ prolapse. Next one is the iatrogenic causes. So the pelvic organ prolapse may occur because of certain iatrogenic causes of the pelvic surgeries that include the vaginal hysterectomy or birth suspension. Certain other chronic factors that contribute to the pelvic organ prolapse also include coughing, constipation, heavy weight lifting, any pelvic mass or tumor, or there's excessive straining. All these factors, they increases the intra-abdominal pressure, and hence they lead to the pelvic organ prolapse. The other causes that lead to a pelvic organ prolapse include the prolonged labor, there is injury to the pelvic diaphragm, there may be injury to the pudendal nerve that supply the pelvic diaphragm, or there may be a certain connective tissue disorder that include Marfan syndrome, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which also lead to the pelvic organ prolapse. And there is another factor, which is birth trauma, which may be a cause of the pelvic organ prolapse. Next one is the grading of the pelvic organ prolapse. The first is grade 0. In grade 0, there is only displaced uterus, but in grade 1, the prolapse does not reaches the hymen. In grade 2, the prolapse reaches the hymen. In grade 3, the prolapse is outside the hymen. In grade 4, there is complete progedentia. Next is the sign and symptoms of the pelvic organ prolapse. First one is the general symptoms. So the most common sign is something coming out of a vagina or peeling up a lump coming down. The other symptoms include dragging sensation or discomfort within the pelvis, dyspareunia, which means painful intercourse, there is back pain occur, or difficulty in inserting the TIM. wounds. If there is a cystourethrosis, there will be urinary symptoms like urinary frequency occur, urgency occur, there is incomplete emptying of the bladder occur, there may be urinary retention occur, and there are recurrent UTIs occur, and there may be stress incontinence occur. And if there is rectocele, there may be constipation occur, incomplete bowel emptying occur, there may be digitation or splanting occur. Let's talk about the support of the pelvic organs. So, first one is the muscle support of the uterus and vagina. So, the muscles that support the uterus and vagina include bulbous, spongiosum, levator, ani muscle, external, anal, and urethral sphincter, superior transverse perineum, and the deep transverse perineum. Next one is the mechanical support. So, a mechanical support to the uterus is provided by angle of anteversion, angle of anteflexion, and the bound ligament, which keep the uterus and the inverted position. And the last one is the ligamental support. So the ligament that provides support to the uterus and vagina and the cervix are pubocervical ligament, transverse cervical ligament, and the uterosacral ligament. Let's suppose this is the pubis and this one is the cervix and vagina, and posteriorly we have the rectum, and this one is the sacrum. So the ligaments include transverse cervical ligament, and the ligament between the pubis and the vagina cervix is the pubocervical ligament, and the ligaments between the sacrum and the vagina cervix are the uterosacral ligaments. So these ligaments include transverse cervical ligament, pubocervical ligament, and the uterosacral ligaments. Now let's talk about the investigation done for the pelvic organ prolapse. So the diagnosis of the pelvic organ prolapse is mainly clinical, but we can do certain investigations. The baselines include CBC, urine, RE, and the X-ray chest, which is done in case of the chronic cupping. Similarly, we can also do abdominal examination and the pelvic examination to exclude any pelvic mass. And a rectal and vaginal examination help in aiding to differentiate the rectocele from the enterocele. Similarly, we also do the ultrasound abdomen to exclude any abdominal mass or the pelvic mass. For urinary continence symptoms, we do the urodynamic study, and if there are rectal symptoms, we do endoanal ultrasound to assess the anal sphincter. Similarly, we also do the rectal manometry. We can also do the flexible sigmoidoscopy or defecating proctogram. Let's talk about the management of the pelvic organ prolapse. First one is the conservative treatment. And conservative treatment, we have preventive measures, so which decreases the risk of the pelvic organ prolapse. The first one is weight reduction, avoidance of the excessive straining, and also avoidance of the heavy weight lifting. Similarly, also avoid the traumatic instrumental deliveries, which also reduces the chances of the pelvic organ prolapse. Similarly, also encourage the patient to do the postnatal pelvic floor exercises, and these pelvic floor exercises are known as the Kegel exercises, and these exercises they strengthen the pelvic floor muscle and reduces the risk of prolapse. Similarly, if the patient has a chronic cough or constipation, treat it. Next one is the pessaries. So pessaries are the intravaginal devices which are inserted inside the vagina to support the pelvic organ, and pessaries are of the following types. The first one is ring pessaries, shell pessaries, Hodge pessaries, and Dutch nut pessaries. And the side effects of the pessaries include fistulas formation and increasing risk of the infection. And these pessaries should be changed after every 3 months. And pessaries are indicated in the following condition. They are inserted on the basis of patient wish, if the mother has not completed the childbearing, if the patient is medically unfit, during and after the pregnancy, the pessaries may be inserted, or if the patient is waiting for the surgery. Now let's talk about the surgical management. So surgery is the mainstay of treatment for the pelvic organ prolapse, and we have different surgical options depending upon the type of the pelvic organ prolapse. The first one is the anterior colporrhaphy. So anterior colporrhaphy is the repair of the interior vaginal wall, and it is done by the anterior compartment of the prolapse. And the anterior colporrhaphy involves the application of sutures to reinforce the fascia between the vagina and the bladder. And the complication of this surgery involve bladder injury, and there is also high rate of the recurrence. Next one is the posterior colporrhaphy. So posterior colporrhaphy is the repair of the posterior vaginal wall, and it is done by the posterior compartment prolapse. And the posterior colporrhaphy involves the application of suture to reinforce the fascia between the vagina and the rectum. And the complication of this surgery involve injury to the rectum and dyspareunia, which is the painful intercourse. And next one is the uterovaginal prolapse. So for uterovaginal prolapse, we have different surgical option. First one is the hysterectomy. So hysterectomy is done in old age when the woman has completed her family and she does not want to conserve her uterus. In hysterectomy, it is important to reattach the uterosacral ligament to the vaginal wall to maintain the level 1 support and prevent the vault prolapse. So hysterectomy is done in older age when the family is complete and the female does not want to conserve her uterus. Next one is the Manchester repair. So Manchester repair is also known as the Gill repair, and it is suitable when the woman wishes to conserve her uterus and she has not completed her family. In Manchester repair, we do the partial importation of the cervix and the approximation of the cardinal ligaments to the cervical stump. And Manchester repair may be combined either with the anterior colporrhaphy or the posterior colporrhaphy, depending upon the type of the prolapse. And the complication of Manchester repair involve cervical incompetency or the cervical scarring. Next one is the sacrohysteropexy. So sacrohysteropexy is a new procedure that is performed, and it is suitable when the woman wishes to conserve her uterus. And sacrohysteropexy involves the attachment of the uterocervical junction to the sacrum using a mesh and the closure of the pouch of Douglas. So in sacrohysteropexy, we attach the uterocervical junction to the sacrum with the help of a mesh. Now the last one is the vault prolapse. So for the vault prolapse, we do two procedure. One is sacrocolpopexy and the last one is sacrospinous ligament fixation. So the sacrocolpopexy involve the attachment of the inverted vaginal wall to the sacrum using a mesh and closure of the pouch of Douglas. And the sacrospinous ligament fixation, it is a vaginal procedure and it has a low recurrence rate, and it involves the application of suture to the vaginal vault and the sacrospinous ligament. So it was all about the pelvic organ prolapse and their management. Today we will talk about the diabetes mellitus and its management. First of all, we will define diabetes mellitus. Diabetes mellitus is a chronic metabolic disorder, or it is a syndrome that is characterized by persistent hyperglycemia, that is a high blood glucose level. And the persistent hyperglycemia can either from defect in the insulin secretion, or there is increase in the resistance to the action of insulin, or sometimes both. They lead to the abnormalities in the metabolism of carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. So, diabetes mellitus is a metabolic syndrome that is characterized by hyperglycemia, and it occurs because of decrease in insulin secretion or increase in resistance to the action of the insulin. Next is the types of diabetes mellitus. First one is type 1 diabetes. Type 1 is the insulin dependent diabetes mellitus, and it is also known as juvenile onset diabetes mellitus. And type 1 diabetes, there is autoimmune destruction of the pancreatic beta cell. So when the beta cell are destroyed by the immune system, there will be no secretion of insulin. So there will be absolute insulin deficiency in type 1 diabetic patient, and hence such patient will require a lifelong insulin therapy. And type 1 diabetes is more common in children and young adults, and the characteristic feature of type 1 diabetes is insulinitis. Second one is the type 2 diabetes. It is also known as adult onset diabetes mellitus. And type 2 diabetes, there is increase in the insulin resistance mainly, along with the progressive beta cell dysfunction. And type 2 diabetes, there is deposition of the amyloid precursor proteins, which are the beta plated proteins, and these proteins deposit in the beta cell of the pancreas and causes the pancreatic cell dysfunction. And it is most common type of the diabetes, account for about 90 to 95% of the cases, and it is associated with obesity, sedentary lifestyle, and family history. And type 2 diabetes is managed with lifestyle changes, oral hypoglycemic drugs, and sometimes when uncontrolled, we also give the patient insulin. Third one is the gestational diabetes. So gestational diabetes is the diabetes that is recognized during the pregnancy, and gestational diabetes occur because of increase in certain hormone during pregnancy, which causes the insulin resistance. And these hormones include cortisol, HCG, and the human placental lactogen. And gestational diabetes lead to the increasing risk of maternal and fetal complications. And gestational diabetes usually resolve after delivery, but it also increases the risk of type 2 diabetes development in future. Fourth one is the MODIS. MODIS stand for maturity onset diabetes in young, means that in young patient there is a feature of type 2 diabetes, that is increase in the insulin resistance. Fifth one is the LADA. LADA stand for latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. Usually in adults there is insulin resistance occur, but in such patient there where the patient is elder, there is autoimmune destruction of the pancreatic beta cell, means that in adults there are feature of type 1 diabetes and LADA. Next is the diagnostic criteria for diabetes mellitus. So criteria 1 is symptomatic patient, means that a patient having symptoms of diabetes, that is polyuria, polydipsia, weight loss, and dryness of mouth, along with the abnormal venous glucose on one occasion. A patient having the fasting blood glucose of more than 126 milligram per dl and the random blood glucose of more than 200 milligram per dl. Second criteria is the asymptomatic patient, means the patient having no symptom of diabetes, but he or she had abnormal venous glucose on two occasions, that is a fasting blood glucose of more than 126 and the RBS of more than 200 milligram per dl. And criteria 3 is a patient having the HbA1c. HbA1c par glycosylated hemoglobin, means that the amount of glucose that is bound to the hemoglobin. So if the average amount of glucose bound to the hemoglobin is more than 6.5, it also indicates this the patient is having diabetes. Next is the oral glucose tolerance test. So the OGTT is used to assess the ability of the body to metabolize the glucose, and it is used to diagnose patients that are pre-diabetic or those having the gestational diabetes during pregnancy. So in OGTT, we keep the patient fasted for 8 to 12 hours, and we measure the fasting plasma glucose, and then we give the patient 75 gram of the glucose load dissolved in 200 to 300 ml of water, and this glucose mixed in the water is to be consumed within 5 minutes. And then we measure the plasma glucose 2 hours after the glucose load. So in a normal patient, after 2 hours the plasma glucose is less than 140, this patient is considered to be normal. But after 2 hours the plasma glucose is in between 140 to 199 milligram per dl, this patient is pre-diabetic. But if a patient having the 2 hour plasma glucose of more than 200 milligram per dl, this patient is labeled as diabetic patient. Next one is the clinical features of the diabetic patient. First one is the symptoms of diabetes mellitus. So the symptoms include frequent urination, that is polyuria, excessive thirst, polydipsia, and increase in the hunger, that is polyphagia. So we have three P's: polyuria, polydipsia, and polyphagia. Similarly, diabetic patient have unexplained weight loss, that is more common in type 1 diabetes. They may have fatigue, weakness, Blowing up region, slow healing wound and sores and patient having uncontrolled diabetes, increasing risk of infection such as skin infection, gum infection, and UTI. UTI is more common in these patients. Similarly, these patients may have recurrent yeast infection. There may be numbness or tingling in the hands and feet that occur because of the nerve damage. They are more common in long-standing diabetes. And similarly, the patient also complain of dryness of mouth and itching of the skin. Signs in diabetic patients include dehydration, weight loss, dark velvety patches of the skin in the areas of the body pores such as armpits. And these velvety patches are known as acanthosis nigricans, which indicate the insulin resistance. And similarly, in diabetic patient, there is reduced sensation in the feet, which indicate the peripheral neuropathy. Next one is the symptoms that require urgent medical attention. These symptoms include severe thirst and dehydration, persistent vomiting in a patient, deep and rapid breathing, which is known as postmal breathing, and a patient having acetonic breath means that patient having a fruity smelling breath, and patient that is confused, having drowsiness or loss of consciousness. These signs are warning signs, and they indicate serious complications such as diabetic ketoacidosis that is more common in type 1 diabetes or hyperosmolar hyperglycemic state that is more common in type 2 diabetes. Next is the management of the diabetes mellitus. First, we advise the patient conservative treatment in which we advise dietary management, and we advise the patient to consume a balanced diet along with controlled carbohydrate intake. We advise the patient to avoid refined sugar and prefer the complex carbohydrates that contain the starch, such as whole wheat, brown rice, and the oat. Similarly, we also advise the patient to increase the dietary fiber such as vegetables, fruits, and having low glycemic index, legumes, and also um, include in the diet the lean proteins that are present in the fish, chicken, eggs, and pulses. Choose or consume the healthy fat such as present in the olive oil, nuts, seeds, and avoid the trans fats. Limit the sugary drinks, sweets, desserts, and the processed food. Also reduce the salt intake, especially in patients having hypertension and diabetic. Also, we advise the patient to eat small, frequent meals and avoid skipping up the meal. Maintain adequate hydration, and if the patient is overweight or obese, we advise them to reduce his weight by 5 to 10%. Second one in the conservative management is lifestyle modification, in which we advise the patient to have regular physical activity or exercise. Um, we also advise the patient to achieve and maintain a healthy BMI. If a patient is doing smoking, we ask him or her to quit smoking. We also advise the patient to avoid the alcohol, and have also advise them to have adequate sleep, that is 7 to 9 hours sleep per night. Mm. Still, with conservative management, if the blood glucose level is high, then we advise the oral hypoglycemic drugs. And oral hypoglycemic drugs are mainly given in type 2 diabetes. These drugs include different classes which have different mechanism. First one is the drugs that increases the um, sensitivity, that is the insulin sensitivity. So the drugs that causes increase in the insulin sensitivity include metformin. Metformin is a biguanide. Second one is the thiazolidine diones. They include pioglitazone and the rosiglitazone. So these drugs causes increase in the insulin sensitivity to the tissue. They also inhibit the hepatic gluconeogenesis so that no new glucose is pumped. And the thiazolidine diones, they cause activation of peroxisome proliferator and activator receptor and causes increase in the insulin sensitivity. Metformin causes lactic acidosis. It is the most common complication of the metformin, and it is frequently asked in the vivas and exams. Thiazolidine diones causes GI upset and also weight loss. Initially, the metformin was considered as a weight loss drug, but now it is considered as weight neutral. Second one is the drugs which causes increase in the insulin secretion from the pancreas, in which the first and most common one is the sulfonylureas. Sulfonylureas include first generation, that is fluoropromide and tolbutamide. Second generation include glipizide and the glyburide. And second one, and insulin secretion drugs include meglitinide, that is the netiglinide. These drugs causes the closure of potassium channel in the beta cell. So when the potassium channels are blocked, potassium is a positive ion, and the positive ion is collected inside the cell. So they causes the influx of the calcium ion, and there will be calcium dependent release of the insulin from the pancreatic beta cell. So these drugs causes the release of the insulin from the pancreatic cell, but the adverse effect of these drugs include weight gain, edema, and the heart failure. Next one is the drugs that causes increase in the glucose dependent insulin release. Means that there will be increase in the insulin secretion. They include glucagon like peptides analogs, means the GLP-1 analogs. They include exenatide and liraglutide. And next one is the dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitor. Normally, the dipeptidyl peptidase enzyme, they causes decrease in the GLP-1 secretion. So when we block this enzyme, there will be increase in the GLP-1 concentration, and will cause increase in the insulin secretion. So the dipeptidyl peptidase inhibitor includes sitagliptin and saxagliptin. The mechanism of action of these drugs is they cause decrease in the glucagon release. So when there is a decrease in glucagon release, there will be no gluconeogenesis, no lipolysis, and no proteolysis, and the level of glucose will decrease. Similarly, they also cause decrease in the gastric emptying, and hence causes more stimulation of the intestinal cell to release GLP-1 and causes insulin secretion. So hence they will lead to the increase in the glucose dependent insulin release. The GLP-1 side effects include pancreatitis, weight loss, increase in the satiety, whereas the dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitor, they causes increasing risk of respiratory and urinary tract infection. And these drugs are weight neutral drugs. Next one is the drugs that causes decrease in the glucose absorption. First one is the sodium glucose co-transporter inhibitor, that is SGL2 inhibitors. They include dapagliflozin and empagliflozin. Normally, SGL2 is found in the intestinal brush border cell, and when we block this co-transporter, there will be decrease in the carbohydrate or the glucose absorption. The adverse effects include dehydration and the increasing risk of the UTI. Remember, the empagliflozin is associated with increasing risk of the UTI. Next one, in the decrease in the glucose absorption drugs include alpha glucosidase inhibitor. This is an enzyme found at the level of intestinal brush border, and this enzyme causes the breakdown of complex carbohydrate and causes glucose absorption or increases the glucose absorption. So when we inhibit this enzyme, there will be no hydrolysis of the carbohydrate, and there will be decrease in the carbohydrate hydrolysis and its absorption. And they include egg carbos and migritol. And the alpha glucosidase inhibitor, they also causes dehydration, increasing risk of UTI, and similarly they also causes hypoglycemia. Last one include the amylin analogs, in which the most important one is pramlintide. The amylin analogs causes decrease in the glucagon release, and they also cause decrease in the gastric emptying, but the adverse effects include hypoglycemia and increase in the satiety. So the drugs, the oral hypoglycemic drugs include drugs that causes increase in insulin sensitivity. They include metformin, tizolidine, diones, that include pioglitazone, rosiglitazone. Drugs that cause increase in insulin secretion, that is sulfonylureas, in which there is first generation and second generation, and they also include the meglitinides, that is natiglenide. Third one is the drugs that causes increase in the glucose-dependent insulin release. They include GLP-1 analogs like exenatide, liraglutide, and the dipeptide L-peptide or inhibitor, that is the sitagliptin and the saxagliptin. Next one is the drugs that causes decrease in the glucose reabsorption. They include SGL2 inhibitor, that is dapagliflozin, empagliflozin. Empagliflozin is associated with increasing risk of UTI, and the alpha glucosidase inhibitor that include acarbose and the miglitol. And last one is the amylin analog, in which the first and most important is the pramlintide. Next is the management of a patient of type 1 diabetes. So for type 1 diabetes, we only give insulin, and the insulin is given lifelong. And insulin, we know that insulin is an anabolic hormone. Um, it may causes the weight gain. The type of insulin include ultra short acting, that include Lispro and Aspart, and they work about 2 to 4 hours. Second one is short acting insulin, that is a regular insulin. Remember, regular insulin is very important, and it is a short acting insulin, and it is a duration of about 5 to 8 hours. Third one is intermediate acting insulin, that include NPH, that is a neutral protamine heterolog, and lenti, and they work about 7 to 14 hours. And the fourth one is the long acting insulin. A long acting insulin is given as a basal insulin, because it provides coverage for about 18 to 24 hours. And the long acting insulin include glargine, Ritimar, and ultra lenti. So the insulins include ultra short acting, that is Lispro, Aspart. Short acting, that include the regular insulin. Intermediate acting, that include NPH and lenti. And the long acting insulin, that include glargine, Ritimar, and the ultra lenti. Next is the regime for the insulin administration, means that how will we administer the insulin to a patient. So we usually start the insulin with a conservative or small dose, and then adjust the insulin according to the patient glycemic control. And most of the type 1 diabetic patient, they require insulin of about zero point 0.5 to 1 unit per kg per day. We have two regime. First one is the insulin administration. First one is the twice daily regime, in which we give the insulin 2 times a day. And twice daily regime include the injection of short acting insulin and the intermediate acting insulin, and they are given in a combination of 7:30, means that such combination includes 70% of the NPH and 30% of the regular insulin. And we give this regime before the breakfast, and then in the evening meal, means that it is given 2 times a day. And two-thirds of the daily requirement of insulin is given in the morning, and the remaining one-third is given in the evening. And remember, the insulin is also given before the breakfast or before the meal. Second regime is the intensive insulin therapy, which is also known as the basal bolus insulin. So the basal bolus insulin involve the injection of long-acting insulin, that is the ultra lenti. So long-acting insulin act as a basal insulin that provide coverage 24 hours. And this basal insulin is given once daily in the evening. And it also include the regular insulin, and the regular insulin is given 3 times a day, and it is given before each meal, that is 30 to 45 minutes before each meal, and should be adjusted according to the preprandial glucose measurement. So in intensive insulin therapy, we give basal insulin, that is the long-acting insulin that provide coverage for 24 hours, and it is given in the evening. And we give regular insulin, which is given as a bolus insulin, and it is given before each meal. And to calculate the insulin dose, let's suppose if a patient has a 60 kg of weight, so we divide it by 2, so it comes as 30. So we have to give the patient 30 units of insulin. So in 30 units, half of the dose is given as the basal insulin, that is the long acting insulin. So 15 will be given as a basal dose, and the remaining 15 are given as a bolus dose. Means that the remaining 15 units are given before each meal, such as we give in the breakfast, then in the noon time, and then in the evening time, that is a 5 and 5 unit of insulin. So we divide the weight by 2, the figure which come then that is 30, and we divide this 30 into two half. Well, the first one is 15 and second is also 15 units. For the first 15 units are given as a long acting insulin, and the remaining 15 are given as a bolus insulin before each meal. Last one is the complication of diabetes mellitus. So diabetes mellitus and mellitus complication are divided into two main groups. First one is the microvascular complication that involve damage to the smaller blood vessel, and these complications include diabetic retinopathy, nephropathy, and the neuropathy. In diabetic retinopathy, there is a damage to the small retinal blood vessels, and they have different phases such as non-proliferative phase, in which we have microaneurysms occur, hemorrhages occur, that is dot and blot hemorrhages and exudate occur. Then we have the proliferative phase, in which there is new vascularization occur, which leads to vitreous hemorrhages and blindness. And then we have the macular edema, which causes visual impairment. So in diabetic retinopathy, there will be damage to the small blood vessel of the retina and may lead to the blindness. Second one, in microvascular complication in nephropathy, in which we have the glomerular damage occur and will lead to the loss of albumin in the urine, and there is progressive decline in the GFR. And the earliest clinical sign of nephropathy is the microalbuminuria, means that there will be a loss of albumin in the urine. And diabetic nephropathy may progress the patient toward the end-stage renal diseases. And diabetic nephropathy is usually associated with hypertension. And diabetic nephropathy, the histological feature is the Kymelsine-Wilson nodule, means that there will be nodular sclerosis and the glomeruli occur. Third one, in the microvascular complication is diabetic neuropathy. Neuropathy means that there will be damage to the nerves occur, and diabetes, the high glucose level in the blood, that causes damage to the small blood vessels that supply blood to the nerves, that is the vasa nervosa, which are damaged due to a high glucose level with time. And the diabetic nephropathy may involve the motor nerve, sensory nerve, or the autonomic nerve. The sensory nerve are most commonly involved. And diabetic neuropathy is classified as somatic neuropathy or autonomic neuropathy. Somatic neuropathy include mononeuropathy that involve damage to a single nerve, that is when median nerve is involved, that causes carpal tunnel syndrome. Polyneuropathy, multiple nerves are involved. A polyneuropathy may be symmetrical, means that it involves the both sides, and the symmetrical polyneuropathy mainly involve the sensory nerves, and they involve the distal part of the body. And the second one is asymmetrical polyneuropathy, means that it involves unilateral side, and the nerves involved are mainly motor and they are proximal. So symmetrical polyneuropathy involve the sensory nerve and they are distal nerve, and the asymmetrical polyneuropathy mainly involve the motor nerve and they are proximal nerve. And in diabetic patient, there may be damage to autonomic nerves that causes increasing risk of portal hypertension, erectile dysfunction, resting bradycardia, and the gastroparesis, means that there decreases the gastric emptying. Next is the macrovascular complication of the diabetes. In macrovascular complication, there is accelerated arteriosclerosis, that is a thickening and hardening of the large and medium-sized arteries, and hence there will be decrease in the blood supply toward the major organ. And the macrovascular complication include coronary artery diseases that include angina, MI, heart failure, cerebrovascular diseases that include TIA and ischemic stroke, and the peripheral arterial diseases that include intermittent claudication. Claudication, there is a decrease in the blood supply in arteries, and they causes severe pain. Similarly, they causes poor wound healing. There may be diabetic, increasing risk of the diabetic foot occur and diabetic foot ulcer occur, and there is an increasing risk of the gangrene, which will lead to the amputation of that organ, that is the foot. So it was all about the diabetes mellitus and its management and the complication. Now at the end, let's read a scenario. That is a 52-year-old, that is female and obese patient, who presented in the endo OPD with a chief complaint of fatigue, polyuria, nocturia, and increased urinary frequency. So these are the symptoms of diabetes. And similarly, this patient is bilateral leg swelling and blurring of vision, means that she had also developed retinopathy and numbness in the lower limb bilaterally, means that she is symmetrical polyneuropathy. She also will report recurrent UTI history and has weight loss of 5 kg. On examination, she is hypertensive, and the BMI is 32 kg, means that she is grade 1 obese patient, and she had bilateral pitting edema, and the urine depth check they shows +3 proteinuria, means that she had also developed nephropathy also, and glucose in the urine, while her RBS is more than 320 milligram per day. So in diabetic patient, the RBS is more than 200 milligram. In this patient, RBS is 320 milligram. So she is a type 2 diabetic patient who had developed long-standing complication like neuropathy, nephropathy, and the retinopathy. So it was all about the diabetes.